give you. Okay, we're back. We're live with Marco and me. Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar in Hilo, Hawaii. He's also with HIEC, the Hawaii Island Energy, I get that right? Cooperative. That's what we got. But Marco is not here in Hawaii. Right now he's in Beijing. So we're calling this show, me and Marco Catching Up in the PRC, People's Republic. Hi, Marco.
Well, a very warm ni hao to you, Jay, and just one small correction. I'm not in the Chinese capital, Beijing, but their very incredible Cosmo city here on the banks of the East China Sea in Shanghai.
Oh, Shanghai, okay. Thank you for that, yeah. Shanghai is actually an easier place to live. The pollution is not as bad, as I recall.
Well, there's an interesting and not surprising rivalry like there is between many major cities of the same country. The folks in Beijing feel or kind of deride the Shanghainese as not real Chinese given the substantial and long-term foreign influence here over the centuries, whereas the Shanghainese think of their friends in Beijing a bit on the snooty side. So interesting to note regional rivalries. Yeah,
and I remember the most extraordinary thing in the middle of Shanghai. There's a place called Chinatown. I'm not kidding. I don't know if you've been there, but it's a very nice place, and I mean a lot of shops and restaurants, and it's Chinatown. So why would you call a neighborhood in China Chinatown? And the answer is, for a long time, Shanghai wasn't very Chinese at all, with those spheres of influence back in 1911 and so forth. So it's now it's more Chinese, but they still call it Chinatown. In any event, so here we are talking about energy, Marco and me, and there's a lot to talk about as always. And part of it involves Marco directly. I haven't seen anything recently about HIEC, that is the Hawaii Island Energy Co-op, but what's going on with that, Marco? Anything?
Well, right now we, along with the other interveners, are just essentially closely monitoring what's going on at the PUC on the HEI merger docket, and the decision was made this week by the PUC to decide on what's known as a procedural schedule, essentially laying out the roadmap for the weeks and months to come, and that will give all the interveners a chance to put in their information requests and questions to the applicants being NextEra and Hawaiian Electric Industries, and just kind of setting the rules of the game and the timetable for these interrogatories and testimonies and back and forth to take place. So we, along with the other interveners, are just essentially waiting for the real game to start for the first quarter, so to speak, of this 4-quarter game.
Yeah. So is the schedule already out?
Yes, I believe it was announced by the PUC just in the past several days. They had kind of two contending versions of the proposed schedule. One was from HEI NextEra, the other was from Jeff Ono there, the consumer advocate, and the PUC decided kind of an amalgam of the two, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, okay. So now it behooves every single member of the intervener team to request information from the utility company. I suppose also from the applicant NextEra. So there'll be a lot of requests for information flying around. And my guess is that the information will be very detailed and complete. Sort of like litigation. I guess this is litigation. But can you give us any idea about what kind of information you might request?
I can't really get into detail at this point, Jay. I mean, there are going to be a number of interveners that will probably take somewhat of a hard edge, given their previously stated positions of concern, if not outright hostility or skepticism to the deal. So they'll probably lead the charge and be more aggressive in their IRs, their requests for information. So we're just kind of, like I said, to overuse the game analogy, the football game analogy, waiting for the game to start.
And am I right to assume that these requests for information will go to both Hawaiian Electric and NextEra? Both, yeah?
Correct, because they are the applicants, so to speak.
Does Hawaiian Electric or NextEra have the right to seek information from the applicant, rather the interveners?
Good question, and I don't know definitively the answer to that. I don't know if the IRs go both ways, but going out on a limb, my impression probably is that it's more of a one-way thing in terms of the interveners posing questions and requests for clarification information to the applicants rather than be the other way around.
You know offhand whether in these kinds of requests for information, there's a control on it? In other words, if I ask for everything but your booty socks, who's to protect the utility from having to spend all its time answering questions?
Again, a very good question that I don't have an answer to. Probably be great to sometime soon try to get Randy Iwasa or Mike Champley or Lorraine Akiva on the show there to answer those kind of questions. Of course, they're not going to be able to provide ex parte information beyond the scope of the actual proceedings of the docket, but they could certainly address those questions more kind of in generic format.
Maybe not. I mean, if they run true to form, the way Mina Morita did it, she wouldn't talk about a pending docket. This is a pending docket. I hope to be able to get them on the show, but I'm not confident that they will answer questions like that. I don't know. Maybe it's too late, but maybe ThinkTech should have intervened also, so we could ask questions the same way. What do you think?
Well, you could have joined the U.S. Department of Defense, who just applied to intervene. What was it, a month or longer after the supposed deadline, and lo and behold, they were granted intervener status this past week. So, it may not be too late for ThinkTech Hawaii to do the same thing. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that it's one thing if the intervener is completely. If the effort of the intervener, what do you want to call it, the agenda of the intervener is benign, is sort of not particularly litigious. But if the intervener wants to really make the utility spend all its time answering Manini questions, and there's 29 of them now, you say, that really makes it hard on the utility. They'll be spending all their time on doing that instead of keeping the lights on. I'd be concerned that it'll be pretty stressful for them, and we will not benefit by that. And this is all a transitional, thing where it's huge, and it's hard to say how this is going to affect their ability to operate. I mean, even without the burden of multiple, interveners asking multiple questions. It's going to be interesting to watch how this works. And I would suggest, just as a prediction, you don't have to comment, but I think a lot of the interveners will be asking hard and detailed and even harassing questions to both of these utility companies because they don't want the deal and they want to make it hard for them. And then these utility companies are going to struggle and strain and go back to Randy Iwasa and say, can you give us a little relief? This is too much and we can't handle this. And then we have litigation on that. And before you know it, we're in a long range 29 plus 2 party procedure that makes that year and a half look easy. and while that's happening, who's watching the store,
Well, that's why there's a limit. There's a limit as to the number of rounds in terms of these IRs. In other words, you can't go on indefinitely and ask for information A, B, C, and then you get answers, and then you come up with GHI, and then X, Y, Z, and then start again at ABC. I mean, there's a limit to the number of rounds of the request for information for exactly what the reason you just said.
Yeah, well, in a court case, they get interrogatories, requests for documents, maybe depositions. I don't know if they have depositions in the PUC, and then everybody respond, and if there are 29 plus 2, then there'll be a lot of people, sort of responding, and lots of activity, and it'll go on for a while before, just logistically everybody can get finished. And so the result would be, at least several months would be taken up by this, and I put quotes around it, this fact-finding, and so forth. I told you before the show, I'm concerned that 18 months is a long time, and I guess Jeff Ono, the consumer advocate, was asking for that. But that is a long time, and And here we have a momentous decision that affects the future of the state, for sure, and the future of every consumer and ratepayer in the state, and the future of gee whiz, of energy, which is huge and central in our economy. And it's taking 18 months for us to get around to say A or nay. This is really hard. And I was going to say, well, just let me make a speech about it because I think 18 months is way too long. But when you get involved in, fact-finding and requests for production information, calculations, these requests for interrogatories might very well be, give us the stats, interpret the stats, give us predictions, projections, tell us every last thing about what you know about the market. That's going to take a lot of time and work, and maybe 18 months is actually a pretty short period of time, and we may have it, way beyond 18 months. Everybody will be busy for 18 months. It won't get done. That's what I think, actually, there's a fair chance of that. Comment?
But it's important to note that if these proceedings go beyond a certain date as outlined, as put specifically in the 374-page merger agreement, then I don't have the document in front of me, Jay, so I can't quote the date verbatim, but I believe that if and when it hits a certain date in the future, then that is an out, essentially, that would give either party or both parties the opportunity to get out of the deal. In other words,
and I think it was a year, wasn't it?
Go ahead.
I think it was a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I must admit I don't have that date right in front of me.
But even let's assume for this discussion, that it was a year or something less than the 18 months that the PUC is now ordered. It strikes me that already, that document, that 274-page document, is under attack. Already, the terms of it are being undermined by virtue of the process. And I think that's just the beginning, though. I think there's lots more to follow. And I think whether they realize it or not, this is a moment in regulatory history where everything goes on the table, including your HIEC, including now Mayor Arakawa. Can you summarize what he's doing, what's up with him?
Well, as Karen Mangelsdorf reported, I believe it was in today's Star Advertiser, the county of Maui, led by the mayor, Alan Arakawa, is apparently putting out there that the county is considering the possibility, at least, of turning Maui electric, or wanting to turn Maui electric into a municipal utility, kind of known by a shorthand name in the industry as a muni. And that's not surprising, given that this proposed merger is really causing no shortage of people and groups to ponder all kinds of different options in terms of changes to the status quo of this shareholder-owned electric utility company here in Hawaii. People are asking, essentially, is there a better way to offer electric service across Oahu, Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and the Big Island? And we, on the Big Island, are proposing at least the consideration of a cooperative model similar to what Kauai did 12, 13 years ago. And now you have the County of Maui, which is out loud pondering the possibility of perhaps going a co-op direction, but a muni is actually very different structurally than a co-op, so it's not something that the county would actually be the mover and shaker behind, but it just sounds like Alan is certainly interested in looking at those options.
Is that within his term of office? I guess he was just elected recently, huh?
Let's see. I believe he was reelected, if I'm not mistaken, in just last November.
Yeah. So we got plenty of time as the mayor. This could be a real big initiative for him. But how would a county, in the case of HIEC, it's pretty simple. It didn't seem simple at the time, but as against the county of Maui, it seems simple that you did create a co-op. You would get funding, you would make an offer to buy the assets of the existing utility, you would acquire those assets, and you would operate them within the co-op and breathe life into it with tens of thousands of ratepayers who elect the board of directors, just as in Kauai, and the board of directors would run the thing. I mean, that seems to follow the deal in Kauai pretty easily, and other places. And I guess the only real question is if the cost of acquiring the assets in Kauai cost $215 million, the Big Island is bigger, greater number of facilities. For that matter, Maui is bigger than the Big Island in terms of ratepayers, facilities, and money changing hands. It's much more than 215, and by the way, that's 20 years ago. So it would be much more than $215 million. So Wall Street had better be, sympathetic, don't you think?
Well, and you can kind of do the math. I mean, if if NextEra is offering to purchase HEI for $4.3 billion without American Savings Bank, which would be spun off, that $4.3 billion could be more or less divided in multiple ways, of course, but one easy, quick way to do it would be to note that, for example, Oahu is by far the biggest island in the state in terms of population, density, and kilowatt-hour sales for HEI. So it stands to reason that Oahu and HIECO is going to be the crown jewel amongst the many jewels there in the HEI jewelry case, so to speak. So if you follow that logic, then you could conceive that HIECO is going to be somewhere perhaps in the $2 billion range in terms of valuation, and MECO and the Big Island could be somewhere in the $1 billion range per utility company. Although that's a very different calculus that one would probably be making if one was perhaps doing a cash deal for for HELCO or MECO rather than doing it as a stock swap.
Yeah, or as a debt finance deal over time. Speaking of time, let's take a short break. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, who joins us from Shanghai by Skype. Thank God for Skype. He's with Provision Solar and also HIEC, Hawaii Island Energy Co-op. We're calling this show Catching Up in the PRC. When we come back, we're going to ask Marco why he's there. It's the why question. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevelin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Marco and me catching up in the PRC. Marco Mangelsdorf joins us from Shanghai. He's with Provision Solar and HIEC, the Hawaii Island Energy Co-op. And I guess the first question I would ask coming back, Marco, is why are you in Shanghai? Has it got to do with energy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, number one, interestingly, even though I've been living in Hilo now for about 15 years and really find my heart and my spirit and my body to be very comfortable in Hilo, a very small town, especially comparatively speaking to Oahu, Honolulu, let alone Shanghai, I found a great kinship, it would seem, with China in general, but specifically in Shanghai. This is a city of almost 24 million, give or take a few 100,000. And since I came here 4 years ago on kind of a self-styled sabbatical to learn some Chinese, I just have felt very comfortable here. It's a very cosmopolitan city. I've made a number of warm and wonderful friendships, both in and out of the energy field. And I'm I don't know if I call myself a budding Sinophile, but my compass in terms of my academic and personal interest in international affairs and international relations was very Eurocentric from my late teens to up until 11 years ago when I made my first trip to China as part of a U.S. Department of Energy National Renewable Energy Laboratory delegation in 2004, and I really got bitten by the Chinese bug, so to speak, and I've just become a passionate student of both Chinese culture, modern political history, going back to the revolution and 19th century, 19th, 20th century Chinese history, but especially how China and their energy industries and their consumption of fossil fuels, along with the United States, is having a huge impact on pollution and carbon dioxide emissions and the quest to try to reduce our carbon footprint. So it's kind of all the above. And without the Chinese and the Americans on multiple levels working closely together to deal with these issues, mankind is going to be in a lot more difficult place. So it's really imperative that we put aside the demonstrable differences in both geostrategy and national security policy, foreign policy, to be able to focus on all those items of consensus that we absolutely, positively have to work together on. So,
absolutely. And while you're there, don't forget foreign investment, offshore investment into Hawaii. We're having a program on this, by the way, on the 16th of April at the Laniakea Luncheon Panel Program. And we have some terrific panelists, so we'll be talking about offshore investment in Hawaii and how it has worked in some cases, how it has not worked in other cases, what have we learned about it, where can we get offshore investment these days, how friendly are we with Wall Street, and how we need to build the state with offshore investment. So I don't know if you'll be back by that time, but it's something to consider for you and anyone interested in funding significant operations here.
Well, I tell you, Jay, one of the easiest ways that could bring in substantially more money into the state of Hawaii on multiple levels in terms of the substantial amount of the upper class here who have become quite wealthy in the course of the past 5, 10, 15 years would be to make it easier for Chinese nationals to get a visa. Now, that is something that's easier to do after the November meeting between Presidents Obama and Xi Jinping. For example, I was able to get a 10-year business visa, so no longer having to renew it year to year to year, and that's of course reciprocal. The Chinese can now as well get 10-year visas to come to the U.S. So the easier you make it for Chinese to visit the U.S., the more money is going to be flowing, most definitely.
Yeah. One of our speakers, by the way, is Brenda Foster. She used to be, I don't know if you know her, she used to be the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. And she knows the entire business community there, both the local business community and the foreign business community. Anyway, that's ThinkTechHawaii.com. You can sign up. So let's go back to the main thread of our discussion. That is what is going on with the deal, and let's talk more about Alan Arakawa. This is significant when a county, as much of a nice person as you are, Marco, you're not a county. Now here's the mayor of a county, presumably represents the county, and he wants to, roll up his sleeves and become a utility company, one way or the other. That's a pretty serious maneuver. Is it real? Is it credible? Can it really happen, or is he just blowing smoke?
Well, it's going to be a huge challenge, and if I'm not mistaken, a ballot initiative would have to be put before the voters for a majority vote. Again, I wouldn't go to the bank on that, but that is my understanding. And the case would have to be made that the municipal ownership of the electric utility would, in fact, be better than the status quo for the residents of Maui County, which again is Maui, the island itself, and Molokai and Lanai. And any such effort, whether it's by Arakawa, and he couldn't just do it by himself. He'd have to have the county council behind him, most definitely, in my opinion. Any such effort would need very strong, very visible, and very energetic political support from both the mayor and the county council, and also from the residents. So there would have to be a very serious discussion about what are the benefits of going in this direction. And there's no shortage of examples of successful munis on the mainland. There's no doubt about that.
They may need a constitutional amendment for Maui. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just thinking this is so extraordinary. They may need to go back to the voters for some supermajority or three-quarter vote or some kind of constitutional amendment vote in order to change the purposes of county operations that much.
And it would be necessarily an agency and bureaucracy within the county of Maui. So does it make sense? Would it be appealing? That's fundamentally the question. Would it be appealing to a majority of the voters and ratepayers on Maui to consider allowing the county to get involved, and not only get involved, but run the show for an electric utility company? And that's going to be certainly at least partially based on people's overall impressions, perceptions, and like or dislike of the county.
Yes, but there's a reality too. I mean, for example, if you apply the same analysis in the county in Honolulu County, you couldn't possibly conclude that the county was competent. They can't even fix the roads. You look around at the infrastructure; it's one disaster after another. How in the world could they keep the lights on? And they have no. And this, by the way, is not a ordinary kind of activity for a county government. It's unusual. They would have to build it from the ground up. They have no experience in running a business, for example, or much more complicated, a utility, which is all technical, requires technical, equipment and personnel. I can't imagine, frankly, any county as such in the state of Hawaii. I'm encouraged by what happened in Kauai, but I think it's a special case. You take Maui, I can't imagine how they would make the jump from being an ordinary county to being a county that runs the utility and keeps the lights on. Soon enough, I think the lights would go off, and then people would really regret allowing it to have happened. But that's just my feeling, my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think there's a fair amount of validity in that in terms of what impression, perception, like or dislike they have of their local government. And it's the co-op model for an electric utility is fundamentally different than a muni model. In a co-op model, you have the owners, the ratepayers, the members who are all, anybody who has an electric meter, who are actually the owners and in control, at least indirectly in terms of voting on a democratically chosen board. They're in control. They set policy. They get dividends if the margin is positive over time. Whereas in a muni, that's not the case. It is the county that is in control, and to what extent it's subject to the PUC, I'm not really sure. I mean, it can't just operate completely independently, but they're really two rather different structures entirely.
Yeah, it's scary though. So here we have this kind of fertile ground. It's come into a fertile ground. The genie, so to speak, is out of the bottle. Everything is somehow on the table, whether it should be or not, it is. And when Sophie Cock and I were asking you questions last time around, one of the big questions is, what are you going to do? What's your plan? Here you have this fertile ground, this opportunity to make a statement, to suggest an alternative paradigm, to make large moves within the context of this approval process. I mean, if I were you, at some point along the way between now and month 18, I would pop something in there and try it out, see what happens. And now it looks like it wouldn't only be you, it would be the county of Maui too, both of them, to see whether they completely change the way utilities work in 3 out of the 4 significant islands of the chain, leaving the PUC with a million options. I mean, it's like redesigning the world from the ground up. And my question to you is, do you really think they will do that? Will they really entertain a complete revision of the whole system within the context of a yes or no vote?
Well, that is, with inflation, the $64 million question, right, Jay?
Maybe 64 billion.
There's no way, of course, that I am going to prognosticate what I think these 3 commissioners are going to do at this point in perhaps the most important merger in the states and territories and republics history.
No question about it. No question about it.
And it's going to, I think the the sports analogy is vastly overused, so forgive me for falling into the trap that I think a lot of people do, a lot of political commentators do, is that we are just at the beginning of the game as the sides are teeing off for the kickoff, and what is going to come with these IRs from interveners who are demonstrably hostile, quite hostile to this deal, and others who are going to be more kind of on the passive side, at least initially. I just don't know. It is too early. It is too early to say. At some point, though, I mean, with the county of Maui, for example, is an intervener, and if at some point, a month, 2 months, 6 months from now, Arakawa is serious and he's done some more due diligence and done more homework, it's conceivable that in one of the motions or one of the IRs, I mean, he could have his council, his county council, put in a specific pitch to, in fact, split off Maui Electric Company from the proposed merger. And he would have to make a case as to why that's in the best interest of the residents of Maui County.
Let's I don't want to put too much heat on you, but let's talk about that. Let's assume he does that. Let's assume, and I think we can assume it. I mean, this article and this press release and conference that he had, yesterday, whatever it was, does bespeak of the possibility that we'll do exactly that sometime within the period of approval here, within the next 18 months. And so all of a sudden it changes the ball game from a yes or no and we're going to call it technical conditions kind of game to, let's split off Maui. Well, somebody said, maybe it was in the paper somewhere, that Maui is a lush market. Maui is there's a lot of ratepayers in Maui. There's a lot of utility bills go out in Maui. There's a lot of money to be made by selling electricity in Maui. And if NextEra came in with a $4.3 billion offer, they want that. That's part of the deal for them. It may be, a big part of the deal. In any event, it sounds to me like it's a critical part of the deal. The chances of NextEra tolerating losing a big market like that, is very small, I think. They won't do it. They'll say, well, thank you, gentlemen, but goodbye. And it's hard to say, by the way, whether they would do it if the Hawaii Island Energy, co-op was successful in pulling Hawaii Island out of the deal. And frankly, if I were NextEra, I would either I would say, well, we're not doing this. Goodbye. You guys have been much too difficult to deal with, as so many other offshore investments have been in years past. Or B, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. We're going to have to adjust the price. We're going to have to negotiate from the ground up. You can't tell us what the dollars and cents are. If you don't want to approve it for the territory where we want to buy and for the price we want to spend, we're out of here. I think there's a fair chance that's going to go down that pike. And now it could be that Randy Iwase and the other members of the PUC understand that fully, and they know that if they start taking pieces out of the deal will fail. And so I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts about whether NextEra would in a million years tolerate a deal other than the deal they made.
Great question, Greg. Great question. Let me answer it this way, kind of in a little bit different format, perhaps a little different approach. Let's ask ourselves, what's the likelihood of the proposed merger, as proposed, being approved in toto without significant modifications or stipulations? How would you answer that question?
Just a yes or a no? It's very unlikely. I think we can all agree that it's very unlikely, and that's not unreasonable. I think the PUC, has a duty to look at what conditions would be appropriate to give comfort to the consumer advocate, to the public, to the state in general. It is a large investment and it is a critical function. So I'm sure they want to at least document assurances that have been made, in all the talk. In other words, if NextEra has said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, If I was on the PUC, I would say, well, okay, fine, but we want that, what you said, that statement, that assurance, that promise, we want that documented, and there's no better way to document it than as a condition. And if I was Nextera, I'd say, okay, all right, I said it, I agreed, I said I would do it, so if you want to document as a condition, I'll agree to that. So, I mean, I think we're already in condition land, if you will, and we'll go further down that track, and the conditions will be the assurances that, you know, I mean, at first, the assurances that Nextera has made. Then it gets more draconian. You know, if you say, well, we want you to change the way you do business. We want you to make good on promises that we believe Hawaiian Electric should have made. We want you to fix everything up. And here's a list of changes, you know, you must make, and therefore money you must spend if you're going to take over this deal. You have to fix everything that we didn't like about what Hawaiian Electric was doing. Now it becomes a different deal, doesn't it? Because then they have to spend more money, and it's a surprise for them. And I think you reach a line there, you reach the needle passes through a certain point, and they say, hey, that's not our deal. If you want us to do those things, we're out of here. So I think
well, you
they
nailed
have to figure
it, Jay.
out where
You nailed
where
it.
that is.
You nailed it, because I think I think the assumption can be made that there will be stipulations and modifications if it gets that far. And the question is, where are those lines for the applicants that these stipulations and modifications go too far as not, as far as souring the terms, souring the deal to the point where they walk away. And no one, of course, knows where those lines are or exactly what modifications, stipulations, changes that the PUC, again, if it gets that far, will require as part of their approval process. So, again, I find it very interesting that Maui County has stepped up and said, well, you know, we have a different idea here that we're seriously exploring. And I can tell you one thing, Jay, that's not going to be the end of it. That's not going to be the end of it in terms of other parties who will be proposing, who knows, maybe having Molokai separately as a co-op, Lanai separately as a co-op. What about Larry Ellison? What does he want? He owns 90+% of the island. Maybe he will step forward in looking at, well, we've talked about on the Big Island what Alan Arakawa is talking about across the channel from Ellison there on Maui Island proper. And, you know, it could just be the beginning of quite a much more dramatic game that we're going to be looking at and observing. And all, again, you know, to go back to the bottom line question for the PUC, asking what's in the best interest of the residents of these islands as far as what kind of electric utility, what structure, and who owns it will be calling the shots for years and decades to come.
Yeah, but you know what, Marco? That may not be synonymous with what will make this deal work. If you know, first you have to ask whether this deal could be in the best interest. And once you conclude that, then you have to operate within that deal. I mean, they could have pie-in-the-sky dreams. The PUC could have pie-in-the-sky dreams about how they want to change everything. But from a practical point of view, how do you get there? And if you want to have a wish list that takes too much money out of Nextera's pocket, this deal's dead. And I think if the PUC doesn't understand that, they're going to find out the hard way. They're going to go through 18 months of process, during which everything will slow down. That's my view of it. And then at the end of the 18 months, nothing will happen. So we will have lost all that time to get to green clean energy. And then we will have a completely amorphous situation, a real big problem situation about where do we go from here after Nextera pulls out. Because when they pull out, we're back to square one. And the funny thing is that people who didn't like Hawaiian Electric, now they don't like Nextera, now they don't like any utility, but somebody's got to be keeping the lights on. One other point I want to make, and I'll turn the mic over to you, is I've written a number of times about something I call insular drift, and that is giving up connection between the islands, having the islands move further away. The Super Ferry was an example of that. There are many examples. The undersea cable is an example of that, where the issue around Molokai and cruise ships keep off my land. I don't want you people from Oahu, you know. This is not healthy for an island state. But there are more and more indicia of that's where we're going. And I don't think people are really aware of the corrosive effect of it. So yes, you could have different paradigms, different systems on every island. You could form up different ways of dealing with energy, different energies. Is this the right direction? Should we be going distributed on every single island? Will we have the necessary resources and expertise to make this work? Isn't it better to have a centralized system? That's what I'm leaving in your hand. What do you think?
Well, I would challenge the notion that we would be going back to square one, Jay, because I have no doubt that the folks at Hawaiian Electric, from the top on down, are committed to intensifying the pace for more clean, green, renewable energy, importing less in terms of fossil fuels to the islands where their utilities operate, and that regardless of what is or is not going to happen with NextEra, I feel that the likes of Connie Lau, chairman of the board of HEI, and Alan Arshima, president of Hawaiian Electric Company there on Oahu, and the parent company of Miko and Helco, I have no doubt that they get that business as usual, as it's been practiced in the past years and decades, is not acceptable.
Marco,
And
we're out of
they-
time. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I hope I didn't cut off a big thought, but there's plenty of room for us to do this again. And if, I don't know how long you're going to be in China, but we should do it in China or when you come back. I want to continue the conversation. It's totally relevant. It's in the center of where I think it should be to discuss these issues. Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar, and also HIEC, the Hawaii Island Energy Co-op, which now exists, but only in a sort of putative way in the Big Island. You're talking to Marco and me, and we're catching up in the PRC. Thank you so much, Marco. Can we do this again soon?
Oh, Jay, so many interesting things to talk about in so little time. Absolutely my pleasure to be with you this afternoon, your time this morning, my time here on Saturday in China. And yes, indeed, let us talk again soon.
Okay. Sai Jin. Xie xie and Sai Jin.
谢谢，再见。